Hello, everybody. One day I was sitting in my office minding my own business when I started receiving all sorts of weird emails. At first, somebody contacted me saying that the latest US election, that was the 2016 presidential election, had shocked them, and they asked for advice on how to cope with the emerging racism and anti-Semitism and so on and so forth. Shortly after, I got an email from a student asking me for advice about the Community Studies Project 12, a class, which I had no idea what it was. And then insults and threats started arriving, and these went on for a while. Now, what was going on? As I found out later, somebody posted this screenshot on 4chan's politically incorrect board. And this is a screenshot to the webpage for a college class where the instructor is asking students to go on 4chan and post about LGBT issues, gender issues, women's rights, and so on and so forth. And this is a very alt-right community. And so they didn't like it, and they decided to find out who was behind this and attack them. And as you can see at the bottom, the email address of a professor is blanked, but you can see a G and then at something.edu. They got convinced that it was me. They found an old email address of me. They interpolated it. They saw that it fits in the blanks. They mistyped it, but it doesn't matter. And so they started calling for attacks against me. They doxed me. They posted information about my online presence, social media accounts, and so on. And then they said, let's go and attack this person. They also started posting templates of emails to send me. And if you look at this one, that is exactly the email that I received that I discussed previously. The person was shocked about the recent election. Eventually, they got convinced that it wasn't me, and in fact, it wasn't me, and so the attack stopped. This is what we call a raid, a coordinated attack geared towards harassing someone online. And if I experienced it as a white male professor, imagine to what extent minorities and women are targeted by this. In fact, our measurements, which I will discuss later in the talk, found that from just a couple of communities that we're monitoring, we can see a handful of attacks a day. So this is not at the scale of other security problems like spam, malware, fraud, but it is very targeted and it can cause a lot of harm to its victims. So this is why I decided to study this problem. What can I do about this problem as a computer security person? Well, myself, as well as many other computer security researchers, have been studying coordinated malicious activity carried out automatically. Bots, malware, spam, and so on. This problem, on the other hand, is coordinated malicious activity carried out by humans. There are relations, but there are also differences. But we can see how people are acting in a coordinated fashion. And so what I wanted to do is applying techniques from computer security, bot detection, spam detection, and so on, to this problem. Today, I will tell you about two types of coordinated attacks that we've been seeing quite a lot. The first one targets people posting YouTube videos. You post a video on YouTube. Later on, somebody will call for an attack against you and that video and post harassing comments and hateful comments on that video. The second one are coordinated hate attacks against online meeting platforms. So nowadays, we are spending most of our professional lives on Zoom or similar platforms. Attackers are trying to disrupt this experience and just post hateful comments, in a meeting, annotate on the screen, and all these kind of things. But first, let me tell you about 4chan a little bit more. In particular, the politically incorrect board on 4chan. We decided to focus on this platform because anecdotally, we've seen them carrying out many harassment campaigns, including Gamergate. For example, also when Microsoft put out the Tailbot, the chatbot that would learn from its users, these people managed to turn it racist in a few hours. So we can see how these people have been attacking online platform as well as online users for a while. So what is 4chan? 4chan is an image board where you can post an image and some text, create a thread, and people can comment on it. But it's quite different from other social online services that we are used to. It is anonymous, so there are no user accounts. And it's also ephemeral. So every time you create a thread, another thread must be archived. There can only be a certain number of threads active at the same time. And once a thread is archived, it gets stored in an archive for a limited period, a week typically, and then it's gone forever. And as you can imagine, anonymity and ephemerality sort of facilitate disinhibition. So there is a lot of bad activity going on this community. We've been monitoring for a while, and we've recently released a dataset of all the posts that we've been seeing. Over 3.5 years, we saw 134 million posts. So it's a much smaller community than Twitter, Reddit, Facebook, and so on, but it's still quite active. What is our threat model? So what I discussed before in the example that targeted me. Somebody calls for an attack by creating a thread on 4chan in this case, and calls for more people to participate. And these additional people will find information about the person being attacked. Online handles, email addresses, content like videos, photos that this person posted, and so on. Report back on the organization thread, and then the attack will happen. They will go and post hateful comments on all these platforms and report back and coordinate with each other, and so on. We decided to focus on YouTube because we found that it's the most popular platform linked on the politically incorrect board of 4chan. And also anecdotally, we observed many attacks against YouTube videos. We can see an example here on the left. What we found is that once the link to a video is posted on YouTube, on 4chan, sorry, we see oftentimes a spike in comments on YouTube. We find that 14% of videos that are linked on the politically incorrect board experienced a lifetime spike within the lifespan of a 4chan thread. Remember, 4chan threads are ephemeral. On average, they last for 47 minutes. This is interesting, but it's not particularly surprising. So we expect the same to happen on social media in general. If you post a video on YouTube, a YouTube video on Facebook, you expect people from Facebook to go and comment on YouTube. So we needed a more sophisticated metric. And what we did was looking at the comments on 4chan and the comments on YouTube, and then treat them essentially as signals. We apply signal processing techniques, and we try to figure out what is the synchronization between these two sets of comments. Ideally, based on our threat model, we expect somebody to go post a hateful comment on YouTube and instantaneously comment back on 4chan about what they just did. This will not happen, but we expect this coordination to be stronger than for videos that are not being attacked, where people are maybe commenting harmless messages. And this is interesting because this synchronization, this cross-correlation, to use a signal processing term, allow us to assign a number to a YouTube video. And we can reason about that number to automatically identify videos that have been rated. So what we find is that the closer the synchronization is to 0, the more hate comments appear on YouTube. We use the hate-based API to identify hateful comments, comments containing hate speech. And as you can see in the figure on the left, the closer to 0, the more hate comments. We see a spike. The farthest from 0, so the least synchronized the comments on YouTube and the comments on 4chan are, the least hate comments. We pretty much see no hate comments if the synchronization is very low. So we can use this number to extract a set of videos for which you are quite confident that an attack happened. And then what we did was analyzing these videos. We developed a set of classifiers looking at all the characteristics of the videos, their thumbnail, the transcript, what is being said in the video. We applied natural language processing techniques there, the title, the category, and so on. And our goal here was to aid moderators. One of the main issues that moderators are facing is that there are too many videos, and it's impossible to analyze all the comments to these videos in a manual fashion. So what we want to do is establishing a risk score. So once you upload a video, can we analyze it automatically and figure out how likely is it to receive hate in the future? And this system is quite effective. We have an area under the ROC curve of 0.95. And in our paper, we show that we can actually identify traits that are typical of attacked videos. And we hope that this will be used by moderators in the future to actually be more proactive in their work. Now, the events of last year basically changed the way in which we socialize and we do work. In particular, we've moved a lot of our interactions to online meeting tools like Zoom, Google Meet, WebEx, Microsoft Teams, and so on and so forth. And this creates opportunities for attackers. So we've seen an emerging way of coordinated harassment, which is what we call Zoom bombing. In a Zoom bombing attack, we have a similar threat model to what I discussed before, but this time the attacker will post a link to a meeting room, let's say a Zoom meeting, and invite people to join that meeting and disrupt it by setting up, obscene backgrounds or annotating the screen or shouting profanities and so on and so forth. So we've seen this happening in the news over and over. So we wanted to understand to what extent it's happening and what do these attacks look like? And also what can we do about it? So here what we did, we first identified 10 popular meeting services, as I said, Zoom, Meet, Hangouts, WebEx, Teams, and a few others. We identified links to these platforms on 4chan and Twitter. And then we applied a mixed method approach. So we first labeled these posts as either calling for a Zoom bombing attack or not. And then we analyzed them both quantitatively with natural language processing techniques and qualitatively with thematic analysis. And we made several interesting findings. First of all, we find that 74% of the calls for Zoom bombing target online classes. These are college classes and high school classes. Even more interestingly, we find that 70% of these attacks seem to be called by insiders. So these are students in the class who are bored, and so they call for strangers to join their classes and disrupt them. And we also find that this is done in a very opportunistic fashion. So these meetings that attackers want to be disrupted are typically happening in real time. So this is not something that's being prepared ahead of time. And this is interesting and somewhat surprising because we expect, or at least, anecdotally, we thought that the attackers would be outsiders. And when you defend from an outside threat compared to an inside threat, the way in which you defend from it is completely different. In fact, the way we are defending from Zoom bombing right now is completely ineffective against insiders. What we are doing is setting up passwords. It's very hard for an attacker to guess a password, but the insider can just give it to the attackers. In fact, we see passwords over and over in these threads calling for attacks. We are setting waiting rooms so that the instructor can figure out who's a real student and who's an attacker and kick out the malicious users. But we've seen over and over the students calling for attacks, instructing people to adopt certain names who are real students in the class to make moderation harder. So waiting rooms become ineffective. We argue that the most effective way to deal with this is to come up with one-time unique links for each participant so that the same link cannot be used by a mob to attack the service. But at the time I'm presenting, only 2 services allow this. So there is still some work to do there, but at least we identify an effective mitigation. Another thing that we need to keep in mind is that as computer security people, we tend to delete accounts, suspend accounts once we find somebody misbehaving. This might work for bots. It increases the cost of attackers. But it might not work for people. People might be sent to more extreme communities, might coordinate better. These communities are moderated, and then they might come back and carry out more effective attacks against mainstream communities like Twitter or mainstream services like Zoom. So this is something we need to keep in mind, and more work is needed for this. So to conclude, I showed you that looking at cross-platform activity can help identify raids early and even identify typical traits of videos that will be attacked, which can then be used to develop proactive moderations. I showed you that the defense mechanisms we are using against Zoom bombing may be misguided because they do not protect against insiders. So we need to think about something else. And I also argue that we also need to keep in mind that suspending accounts might have unwanted consequences. And we need to keep that in mind and design our mitigations considering the effects that the platforming can have. And with this, I thank you, and I'm open to questions.